When do I need to raise money? It's always a shift from building a great product, which everyone aspires to do, and getting it into the market. How are you going to sell this thing? What's the market available, and our clients really excited about it?
Welcome to Lifeside Continuum. I'm Bill Schick, your Fractional Chief Marketing Officer. Today, we're digging into 3 big ideas founders trip over all the time. How to choose and trust the right partners, understanding the 3 founder archetypes and their blind spots, and moving from MVP to version 2 to real commercialization without getting lost in fantasy timelines or TAM daydreams.
Been in the medical device business for long enough to know that it takes a village. It's very hard for an individual company or an individual to know everything they need to know to actually bring a product to market.
Today, we examine de-risking your business and answer, when do you stop sprinting alone and bring in the people who can help you de-risk and actually get to market? A lot of smart teams believe they can figure it out later, and you'll hear why later is how you burn cash, kill momentum, and miss the window.
We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. It's really exciting, and if you can tell that story well, and you can show them that there's a path to doing this.
I invited Greg Lange, President and CEO of Symbex. His world is product design, med software, regulatory strategy, and commercialization. He's built teams, shipped products, answered to investors, and lived through the "this looked a lot simpler on a whiteboard" phase many times.
I love working with founders and helping them navigate through the journey. Launching products is hard. Bringing new innovations to the market is hard, and it's a puzzle.
By the end of this conversation, you'll walk away with a practical checklist for when to bring in the right partners, how to pick partners you can trust, and concrete moves to shorten the path from prototype to paid without lighting your burn rate on fire. All right, let's get into it. So Greg, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Tell us a little bit about you and your journey and how you got here today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, president and CEO of Symbex. We're a product design and development firm. My background is, master's in biomechanics, and did a lot of orthopedic and, clinical research early in my career, and, eventually landed in the medical device space 20 plus years ago. Vascular surgery focused company doing software as a medical device and clinical trials and working with big companies, and really, grew that company, and, private equity held. I was CEO for the last 6 years of my 15 years there, and, really enjoyed that experience. And then, moved from that company after we sold it to a strategic to Symbex. So I've been at Symbex for, 8.5 years now. And it's really a pleasure to be at a company that, gets to interact with lots of early stage companies, and big companies. But, I love working with founders and helping them navigate through the journey. Launching products is hard. Bringing new innovations to the market is hard, and it's a puzzle and a challenge. So that's my world.
Love that. So quickly, what does Symbex do, and what's your role there today?
Yeah. Well, president and CEO of Symbex. We're not a big company, so we're about 50 people, and we have 2 components to our business. One is engineering, so taking product ideas from napkin to ready for manufacturing, and then commercialization strategy, which is regulatory, reimbursement, market intelligence. And we feel like putting those 2 things together is essential, because, even if you think you have the right product idea or you've developed the right technology, most of my first questions are not engineering focused. They're, what's somebody going to pay for it when when you sell it? And so that means, what is the COGS? What is the cost of that thing to manufacture need to be? How is that payment process going to happen? And what are the ultimate needs of the customers? So that we're building something that actually is successful when it gets into the market, not technically successful, because sometimes that doesn't matter. You have to meet the clients where they are. So that's our world at Symbex. And we work with companies all over the world, big companies, small companies, and been doing it. This year is our 25th anniversary. So we've been doing this for quite a while. At any given time, we probably have 20 to 30 different companies that we're working with, helping them in some capacity. And this year we've had companies from Switzerland, Iceland, South Korea, all over the globe. We're working with a really innovative client in New Zealand right now, and it's been really fun over the last few years to see us going from U.S. to kind of global presence. So that's what we're doing.
You said something before that is interesting. You work both with startups, so directly with founders and entrepreneurs, but also with more established companies. I imagine, given the scope of what you do, working with those two groups is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about what you see happening with them and maybe some of the challenges that they struggle with, particularly in the context of working with partners, because there maybe the philosophy of those an individual versus an established company on working with partners is a little bit different for them.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Partners are really required, a piece of the equation for most entrepreneurs and companies. Talk a little bit about that. What do you see out there?
Well, I think the partnership discussion, it's so broad. How do you find the right people? I've been in the medical device business for long enough to know that it takes a village. It's very hard for an individual company or an individual to know everything that they need to know to actually bring a product to market. And so you do need to rely on people, and hopefully you find people that you trust, in key partners. So the partnership discussion for early stage companies and established companies, wildly different. If you're a well established company, we've done a lot of work with Stryker and Analog Devices and Agility and a number of really big companies. They can be very specific about what they want. They know how much they're going to pay for it. They really have a process dialed. And the good thing is what you're getting into. It's generally very clear. The hard thing is what I would ask of them is treat us like a partner. And I think sometimes it's a means to an end, as opposed to developing a relationship that actually can mutually support one another, as we bring ideas to the table and maybe make what they had thought they were doing a little better than they originally that they had intended. So I think that's that's my message to larger companies is really explore how do we get to the best solution, not here's what I want you to build and here's the specific product requirements that we have to do. Let's explore that a little bit, because the advantage that a company like Symbex has is we work with lots of companies and lots of new technologies, and we can bring innovation to the discussion that may not be on their radar. So that's the established companies. For early stage companies and partners, this one, at any given time in the development of a company, you need different partners, and figuring out how you prioritize that so that you're focused and you're getting the support you need, I think is really hard, it's easy, for me, I have a product design and development firm, we can help you with specific things, come to us with what you need, and then let's go on that journey together. But I think if you're an early stage company, what's the thing that moves you in the next quarter, in the next 6 months, in the next year, and what expertise do you need? And really, you have to prioritize that. And I think that one's a really challenging one for most entrepreneurs, because they have, a vision and hopes, and they want to eat the whole pie. And sometimes you can't eat the whole pie.
I think you make a good point there, where an individual simply hasn't been down this road before.
Yeah.
And so you really don't know what you don't know until you get to sort of that critical point in the process.
Yeah.
And I do, in speaking with somebody the other day, is sometimes a little bit of a mentality of, well, we'll just deal with that when we get to it. We don't have to worry about that now.
Yeah.
And I think we could get into a big partnership discussion on advising against that maybe. But you also make a really good point in having that, different partners at different stages. And I think part of that is knowing, what or who to bring in at what time, at what time, or what part of the project. So tell me a little bit about your experience. Tell me a story about,
Mhm.
um, you know, developing a partnership or getting through a partnership where um, it was a little bit of a struggle, maybe, but also righting the ship.
A few things that we've seen over time.
Mhm.
The classic example of partnerships gone well or partnerships maybe not gone in the straightest line. We worked with a company in Maine. Really great concept and product, and they're on the market today, and they're doing fairly well. But certainly, like you raise money and you think about what partners you need, and you go down a path, and then then you realize that like what's really the priority. Now it sometimes just it lands on money, and like how do we get the most revenue possible, and
Mhm.
it's always a shift from building a great product, which everyone aspires to do, and getting it into the market. The MVP idea, which is I need somebody actually buying this thing, getting feedback so I can iterate. So we work with this company in Maine. Really great idea, great leadership team. And really focused on getting product in the market, which they did. That was great. And then thinking about second iteration of product, and really diving into, all right, now how do we go from MVP or first product to V2, and then really pulling it back and going, hey, we really need to focus on commercialization and selling and getting into the market so that we can have the revenue to support the V2 product. And I think like this is knowing that this is a potential pass, or seeing what the risks are. Could have maybe accelerated the marketing and commercialization and like earlier, and maybe been a little bit easier in the winding down what we had aspired to build, in their next product.
Let's sort of maybe back up the train and really talk about knowing when to bring someone in. Quick interruption. I've got an offer for med device and life science companies doing at least 3 million a year, but dealing with growth challenges. The first step is really easy. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. The details are below. The rest is to follow. That's it. Let's get back to the podcast. Knowing when to bring someone in. Something that I see a lot is a lot of entrepreneurs when they're just starting out. It might be a physician or a surgeon or a nurse. It might be somebody more technical, like a scientist or an engineer. A lot of times they've spent their lives solving everything themselves. And so they start off sort of going it alone, and then they almost get backed into bringing in partners and figuring that out. And I think you and I have spoken before about different founder archetypes.
Yeah.
So what we see out there and how we deal with them. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tell me about your view on the three types, and then we can talk about a little bit how they might interact with partnerships.
Yeah. Well, let's focus on early stage companies, these
Mhm.
founders that, come from either strong clinical background, which happens all the time, and strong technical background, coming up with an engineering expertise with a particular skill or novel skill that can, I call that the have a great hammer, what do I hit with it approach.
Yeah.
And then there's the business person entrepreneur, that is capable of identifying challenges and capable of solving that problem, but really needs support. In each case, they have different needs, but the core, or the thread between all of them is like, how do you de-risk your not product but your company. And if you're a clinician, let's talk about that archetype first. What do you know? Like, how the procedures work, how you're engaging with customer or with patients, what the challenges are, and like, often, like, I can see a path to a better way to treat these patients, and it's so common. The clinician sees that. And then what happens is we go into the lab, they go into the lab, they can get grants to do that, do animal studies and solve that. And like if you stepped back and at that point when they said, all right, I have this great idea, what do I need to know? Then if you talk to a regulatory person, they would say, we better figure that out right away. If you talk to a reimbursement person, they better say, well, how's this all getting paid? Because if you don't know that, then you're going to waste a lot of time going down the solving this problem. Both of those things have to be part of the journey and have to happen at some point. But thinking not like a clinician and bringing in the other perspectives, it's not hard advice to find. There are lots of people that have that expertise, but actually knowing that I need to think about that early so that I am not building something that my own hospital won't buy. And I think that's kind of the clinician trap sometimes is, all right, like I know the patient, I'm solving the problem, but I don't necessarily think through the whole business plan, basically. And like likewise, if you talk about the engineer, and we work with lots of academic institutions and engineering schools that like have scientists that are doing really great work, and they're developing materials and technologies that clearly have an application in the medical space, and you have to have that clinical expertise, right? And some of them do a great job of partnering with clinicians, but certainly, like now you can pull together the engineer with the clinician. Great. That's a partnership made in heaven. And you still have to answer those questions, which are, what's the market going to pay for, and what's the regulatory pathway? I see those challenges all the time, and I don't know if there's a perfect, there's never a perfect formula, like each entity is different. But once you start talking to people about what you're doing, like solving some of those problems, we would call it de-risking. Like how do you de-risk this product development? Because doing 2 years of clinical research and animal studies to realize that somebody else in the market solved this a different way and it's a better way, or like this is going to be a class 3 product and it's going to cost you $10 to $15 million to bring to market, maybe 25 million, and there's no way to get it there. Like, boy, you don't want to learn that later. Like, so I think learning that early. And then the third archetype is just the triangle there is now you have this entrepreneur who actually is capable of identifying the problem, but really needs the technical expertise and the clinical expertise to really drive it home, and recognizing early, here's the partners that I need, and that is the people that can help me validate that the idea I have, the problem I've identified, actually is a problem that needs to be solved. And I see each of those archetypes coming to us, and it just means that every time we talk to them, it's a little different questions, but generally the theme is always the same. Tell me how it's going to get into the market.
What I hear is, or what I wonder about is, when should I start thinking about these things? Because I think about sort of the innovative process, if you want to call it that, and as somebody who creates things, I often just want to sprint. I just want to make and I want to make and I want to go.
Yeah.
And I don't want to slow down, and I certainly don't want to stop. It feels to me like, well, I should pause what I'm doing and start having these conversations, and sometimes that feels a little bit frictiony to me. What would help me is if I knew at what point is the right time in my creative process to start looking at bringing in additional expertise. And what are the questions I should absolutely answer at that point? Because some of these things do feel like, well, couldn't I wait a little bit? Shouldn't I really get down the path a little bit further before I start investing my time? What feels like I'm slowing down, I'm spending money on things that, maybe I'm not even going to get there. So I sort of feel that this is a little bit of a struggle. So do you have any recommendations on when is the right time to start bringing in people who are experienced, and what experience?
The challenge is, like, you're passionate about solving a problem and you just want to go. and I think that's our natural tendency. Like, put your head down and work hard and figure it out. And you can't, when the idea happens, you can't go, like, what's the market need? Because I don't even haven't vetted the idea well enough to actually communicate with someone. So there's always that tension. I don't think there's any clear advice there. What always happens, though, or often happens, is you've gotten somewhere down the road, and inevitably somebody will say, well, you should have asked these questions early on. Like, uh, the we participate in a lot of accelerators. So we've really enjoyed our partnership with Dartmouth and the Magnuson Center. They have a couple accelerators there, and seeing that accelerator process, teams, that have different people on them, and figuring out how to bring a product to market. The first part of it is figuring out what's the product, and how do we like, communicate it well. And you have to do some of that work. Like, and at some point you're going to say, okay, like, now I need other feedback. I wish I could tell you there's like, week 2 do this, week 4 do this. Like, what I rarely see, even in pitch decks, or like, that have like development timeline. They're like, what I would love to see is the broader product timeline. Like, what do I need to know at each stage, before I go on? What are my gates? And most of those gates are technical, right? So how do I prove? How do I validate that this particular device is effective and safe? But at the same time, the other things on that timeline are: did I do a little bit of customer discovery to know that I'm solving the problem that my customers are actually going to need? Because at some, like, usually the forcing factor, is, when do I need to raise money? Because once you go to an investor, the investor is going to ask the same questions that I want to ask, which are, like, how are you going to sell this thing? What's the good, what's the market available, and our clients really excited about it? And show me the 500 clinicians that said they'll buy it as soon as you create it. So, like, there's no perfect, like timeline, or when you trigger those things. But I would say, thinking through that, this doesn't have to be put everything on hold for a month. It could be, like, a few hours with a couple friends. Say, all right, what do I need through this process? In the next month, we need to know, what's the regulatory, give us a regulatory understanding, or I'm going to spend some time using AI to come up with my competitive landscape, so I know what other people are doing and what their products are. Like, those kind of things are kind of, building out, so that you're basically putting the things in your belt that you need in order to get to the next round of funding, and communicate effectively with potential investors and partners.
I think what I see too is, I can do it all.
Right.
And I'm just going to go heads down and just go, brute force maybe describes it as getting through, and I'm going to tackle every step of everything along the way. I mean, we're working with highly intelligent people. They can do most, if not all, of the activities, along the process. But when you have one person doing everything, that process then typically extends way out, because
Right.
you can't do everything at once.
Yeah.
And everything takes time. And also, that person, even though they can learn it and then do that, they often don't have the experience of the nuances of the process, or the system that we're basically selling into, the healthcare system,
Yeah.
and knowing how to deal with that. And I often see surprise when a clinician, thinking like a clinician, has solved a problem and brings it into the system, and the system's like, no.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's not that the solution isn't good, it's that it's disrupting. The system's built to sort of keep those things at arm's length, and stress test them. So
Yeah.
I see that a lot. So in building a partnership, It sounds to me like while you're not, drawing a line in the sand and saying, well, at this point you should start thinking about these things specifically. I think maybe what you're encouraging is at very early on, start talking to people who've been through that before.
Yeah. Well,
because they will know.
Yeah. Let me tell you a quick story. I talk to probably 5 to 10, early stage companies a week. A lot of them, they're calling to ask for, like, how do they move forward in different ways. I'm working with one particular one now that I think has done something, like better than I've seen anybody else do. Uh, it, because he envisioned a product, and he told the story of the product well. And one of the first things he did was say, here's the list of key people that I need on my team to make this a successful product and brand. Uh, and he had basically a partner first mentality. Which, like, in some cases I wouldn't, like, it's counterintuitive a little bit. Like, why would I bring all these people in? It's a distraction. But for him, what it did was he was able to sell the idea to people that were motivated to be part of his journey. And what that led to is not, like, partners that can provide advice, but investors, people that said, I'm on board. Let's do this together. And so, he didn't come up with the plan and then take it to a bunch of VCs and say, all right, now will you invest in this? And by the way, I've de-risked the whole thing. No, he started the opposite and said, I'm going to the people that I think are going to help me make this product successful. And told them, this is what I'm going to need to be able to get this thing into the market. And amazingly, they all said, yeah, we want to be on this ride. And so, like, here's how we can contribute from an investment or partnership perspective. And he hasn't raised any money, and he's pulled in a consortium of investors and people that are committed. So, you have clinician or engineer heads down not doing that, and then you have entrepreneur doing exactly the opposite, I think.
So that person comes from the entrepreneur, the business side. And one of my questions was going to be, how, like, do you know how or why they started there versus going product and going it alone until I'm forced to bring in additional partners? What do you think was really different? Was it being in that group of business / solution first, or do you think it's something else? I don't know if you have insight into that.
It's a great question. Like, I don't know. And honestly, like, I'm still exploring this myself. Like, it has been, a little mind blowing, like, because if you sit in enough accelerators or, like, talk to enough entrepreneurs, there's I wouldn't say a recipe, but it's fairly straightforward. Like, here are the steps along the path that you need to do. They can happen at different times, but this is generally what you do. And, like, he turned it on his head, I think. And so getting my head around it, like, how did he get there? I think he thought big, like this, like, you can say, I'm going to develop a new bandage, and the market is big for bandages, but I can do it a little bit more cost effective, and I can improve the healing properties of the wounds that it covers a little bit better. And then there's straightforward process to, do that. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to put all the other bandage manufacturers out of business because this is what is going to take over the world. So he thought big. Here's the big vision, and went there first, and then could really tell the story, like, articulate that this is what I'm taking to the world. And it's surprising. I think it's human nature. Like, people could argue with this one, but I think it's human nature that we all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. That's really exciting, and and so if you can tell that story well, and you can show them that there's a path to doing this, even if there are competitors in place, and they're, I think people get behind it, and I think that's what he's done really well, is start with, here's the big idea, here's the vision. Now, based on that vision, who do I need on my team? And don't think small, think big. So who from Apple do I need? This isn't the case for this particular, but who from Apple or who from Google aligns with what I'm doing? Let's get them on the team, because all of a sudden you have instant credibility, and thinking like that, for him, it's worked out well. It's not easy to do, but he's done it exceptionally well.
It's an interesting story, but it illustrates something that I bump into all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a company will be overly focused on TAM, a total addressable market. And then that becomes their entire world. And it is, first of all, it's not a great target to attach your company to. Because you see that big number and just, you think, your eyes turn into dollar signs, and that becomes the focus of everything. I like the idea of having everybody, on the same bus, working or driving towards a bigger mission or a bigger goal than just TAM.
Mm-hmm.
And that story you shared really illustrates that. In that when you're that's your perspective, you can do bigger things with, I think, less effort. It's simply not as hard because people are on board.
I think it's true. Like headwinds versus tailwinds, headwinds are, I've got to, you can start off and you're like, who are the physicians that I need, and work really hard to convince them to actually get on your team. And they're busy physicians, and they have plenty of other things, competing things, and you're just going to battle that. It's hard to get them, but if you come in with the right idea and they get excited about it, and then all of a sudden they're calling their friends, hey, like, I want you to, totally different, experience in the and effort and, execution.
Well, when you can get people working kind of, I guess with their passion or from their heart, they'll take steps for you. They'll do things for you out in the world that you just can't motivate them with this, with dollar signs.
Right.
You really get to the heart of it. And I think that's been proven time and time again. So for you, are there any other challenges kind of still focused on, the entrepreneur early stage, that you see in going to market, and where partnerships are really critical?
If you went down, if we went down one layer lower, so you've identified, like, we've been talking about, like, how do you find the partners, and like what do you think about, like, when do these partners come in? But take it down one layer lower. You have 5 options to find a regulatory person that can help you. Like, how do you find the right person? And there are, expertise and, experience in the particular thing you're doing, but I always come back to, can you trust them? Are they going to be somebody that they're on your team? You can call them up, and they actually are there for you in sometimes at 10 p.m. because, you had a call at 6 p.m. from one of your advisors, and they said, wait a minute, did you consider this? And you've got to call the regulatory person, and they actually pick up the phone, and like, so developing the relationship, making sure that you've built the trust with them. Like, I think, there's the mechanics of establishing the partnership, but then there's how do you, what is a partner? A partner is a trusted person, and it's people, not entities, they're people, and find the people that you trust, and like, treat them just like you'd be hiring a new employee. Your second employee of your company, pretty important hire, right? Well, it's no different in a partnership. Like, make sure you do due diligence and work with people that you like to work with. mean, I've had plenty of experiences where I've had people come to me and talk to me about a product or a company, and the idea resonates, but the person resonates. Like, I see their passion. Like, I see that the integrity is there. Like, I see that they're going to have my back, and I'm going to have their back, and that makes sense to me. And I always tell early stage companies that work with us, like, product development is hard. It's not a straight path. You're going to, like, we are going to come to a place where we're going to have a difficult conversation. We all know that. Like, I'm sure you've experienced, Bill, we're not getting all the marketing leads that we need to get. Like, yeah, all right. So what are we doing about it? Let's talk about that. And that's, like, you have to have the ability to have that hard conversation and be comfortable having that hard conversation, and trusting that they're still on my side. So I don't know. Hope that makes some sense.
It does. It does. And I think I want to hear a little bit more about maybe what you look for, maybe what your criteria are.
Yeah.
I'll share that I look for people who tell me no. And they don't just tell me no to control it or argue.
Yeah.
They're telling me no because they have expertise. But no is only the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
They'll say, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but that, like, you simply don't have the expertise or the grounding to understand this problem. It doesn't work like that. But I understand what you're trying to do, and here's the path, or here are options
Yeah.
to succeed there. And I think I run into this actually all the time with sales calls for what I do, because I begin my consulting in the first conversation.
Right.
And it often starts with somebody saying, okay, you work in life sciences, you work in med device, we have an SEO problem. And that's my least favorite problem to solve.
Right.
But we get into the conversation, and it's apparent that they don't have an SEO problem. They actually have a product market fit problem.
Yeah.
They might have one of a variety of other problems, and they're sort of going to what seems like the easiest thing, which is, let's just tweak some messaging and the market will finally get it. But it's a bigger problem, and so I often will say, you actually don't need this right now. You don't need this. You should be focusing over here. And I tend to not win the business, but I'm also not taking it to win a client. So I look for partners that will tell me no as early, that are establishing that credibility and expertise. What do you look for in partnerships?
Yeah.
So we're speaking for the audience here, understanding that early on they want to start sort of bouncing ideas off and getting a better understanding of how to bring these things to through development and to market. What do you look for in a partner, and somebody that you can trust? What are some of the attributes?
Yeah. Well, I like your idea of, having an honest and, like, frank conversation. Like, that's the way it should be. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. As humans, it's hard. Some people are much better at it than others, but it's important. Like, you have to have that, but you have it in a respectful way always. Like when I think about this question is, like it's little, for me, it's little things. It's people following through. And like you have a conversation, and then they say they're going to send you something, and then they don't send, and you have to track them down, and they don't respond. Like, all right, that's a red flag. Like, we're going to negotiate an NDA, and the negotiation of the NDA takes longer than the whole project would take, because we've got two lawyers involved, and we've got like different things happening, and like, nothing against non-disclosure agreements, they're important. However, if the NDA is going to be that hard to navigate, when it gets down to negotiating product requirements, like, this is going to be really hard. I also think that, like, I like to tell our prospective clients that Symbex isn't a throw it over the wall kind of company. Like, you're not coming to us and saying, here, build this for me, I'll be back in 6 months. No. That's not how product development works, by the way. like
Right.
like we're hand in hand here. and I don't expect you in my office every day, but I do expect you on regular calls. I do expect you giving my team feedback. I do expect you holding us accountable. And so, like, our job is to be as transparent as possible, but your job is to hold us to it. Like, make sure that the expectations are clear and that we're on the same path, because at any given time, like, I live by a no surprises rule. There should be no surprises. Like, we shouldn't get a month in and go, product's going in the wrong direction. No, no, no. Like, you've seen everything we're doing, like, and so I think, back to what are the red flags early is, do they communicate well, and are they on top of it, and are they willing to be engaged, and again, entrepreneurs have they're all flavors, and some, attention to detail high, way down in the weeds and really willing to dig in, and some, like, just live at a different level. You need both of those in your organization, but somebody that's interacting with a partner has to actually live with the partner, and maintain that relationship. Like, those are the things that I think about when we first engage with someone is, are they going to be a good, like, are they going to walk this journey with us? Because, like, it's their product, and we want to, and we want it to be our product, but we want to do it together. Those are the things that really, and then you could go maybe one level technically deeper. Is, I talk to lots of entrepreneurs that come in and say, I need a prototype for this. And I say, all right, great. Show me the requirements document. And one, it comes in an email with 5 bullets, and I'm like, all right, we're going to do some work to pull this out of them, or it's clear that they don't know what they're building, like, so, like, and this is back to the big company, small company conversation. Big company comes with, 30 to 50 page requirements document, down to the color of, the color of this has to be this shade of orange, like, yeah, all right, I get it. And then you have the entrepreneur that says, it's just got to have a button. You're like, well, what does the button have to do? I don't know. Like, it's got to go here and here and here. Like, all right. So, but I think that, like, there is a part of it that's a journey. Like, we're going to explore that together, true. And you still need to know where you're going, so if, we occasionally, I would say, 1 out of 20 don't know where they're going, and the recommendation is, all right, go back, build a requirements document and come back to us. And that's not it's not exactly what they were looking for, but it's necessary. So tough love kind of arrangement.
Exactly. It's one of those things that when you're of the mindset of go, let's just get this thing going and done and out there, and every second that we're not doing that just feels terrible. This feels like one of those things that's just stalling the process.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I want. I want you to take that and I want you to make that piece green instead, and then we'll solve all the problems associated here. And it's really not that simple. Like, it doesn't need to be crazy, 50 pages. There's kind of a minimum viable requirements, like a clear product and project definition.
Yeah.
And you really need those. I think one of the common threads here is communication.
Yeah. Exactly.
You have expectations and experience that your partner won't have.
Right.
And that's one of the things that makes the partnership work, is if your partner has all of the same experience, and expectations that you bring to the table, there's no point in having the partner there. One of the values of a partnership is, you've done things I've never done before, and you're going to be the expert in the room.
Yeah.
So really looking at providing and it comes back to providing the right amount of information so that everybody can really do their best work.
Yeah.
So that communication, I think, is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So this is great. So we're close to time here.
Yeah.
It flew right by. I always like to provide the listeners and as a quick reminder, we're talking to people who are they're entrepreneurs or founders, or the people within an organization that own product, development and the entire process. In the context of this conversation, what are three easy tips for making this whole process of bringing a product through development and into market? I mean, there are probably a million, but what are three for you that they can walk away today from listening to this and say, okay, I should do this differently. I definitely am headed down the wrong path here. Just concrete, actionable things.
I tend to be a little bit more of a big picture guy. My advice always is get the vision right, get the mission right, and understand what the steps are in that you need to do to realize that vision. This is a little bit more, like softer skills, but once you have those right, you can communicate more effectively with your partners. You can communicate with investors, and you can communicate with your employees and partners if you are clear. Here's where we're going. We're rowing the boat in this direction. This is what we do, that mission, and here are the steps we need to do to get there. Then you get clarity, so all else falls from that. But first step, and I would take it seriously. If you have done any work on writing a vision or mission statement, that sometimes it's just, people look at it as a necessary evil. I think for you, this is not about putting something on the website. It's about how you communicate with your team, and your partners, like I said, that, make sure you know where you're going and you can communicate that to everybody and how we're going to get there and what are the steps. Like, I want to know in the next quarter, this is what I'm delivering. And the quarter after that, this is what I'm delivering. And at that point, I'm going to say, all right, we've done these things. Does our plan need to change at all? Let's keep going. What's the next quarter? But, be very clear, and that helps all of us. All right, we know what we need to achieve. And it gives me constraint as a partner. Okay, like, I got it. I can deliver within that constraint, or I can't if it's not realistic. But lay it out. That's my advice.
Yeah, I like that a lot. We talk a lot about kind of a business OS, like an operating system.
Yeah.
So if I understand your rules, if I understand how you make decisions and what you're aiming for, so we talk about mission and vision. Sometimes we get into the why you're doing this and what's driving this,
Yeah.
And the impact that you hope to or expect to make. That helps us make decisions that are more in line with where you're taking your company. So many times, and this was 4 days ago, working with a client, they're putting finishing touches on a website, and they came to the table, and this is the first time in the relationship where they said, I was on somebody else's website the other day, and they have their mission and vision on there, and I think it'd be really cool if we had one.
Yeah. All right.
You mean like a page with that on it? No. We don't. We just haven't really done this, and I kind of like theirs, and I want to do something like that for us. Like, how did we get here today without that?
Right.
And so you can brute force it, but it makes things a lot more difficult when people just don't know what or why you're doing it and how you plan on getting there. So I think that's really important. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
Greg, anything else that you want to add before we jump off today? You've been great.
I appreciate, like sharing a little perspective, I feel like, we have the honor of working with early stage companies and seeing people approach it in different ways. And, it's really fun, to take the learning, from them and, try to guide people, as we see them come to us, all right, if I were you, we talked to our staff about it, about put yourself in their shoes. What do they really need right now? And sometimes we'll say, I don't, I think you said it earlier. I don't think you need that right now. SEO is not your problem. Like, for us, you might think that you need this done, but I think if we did this approach right now, it'll better inform us for what you really need. That's okay. Let's do that. And I think when you work with early stage companies, you always have to be cognizant of, hey, burn rate is burn rate. There's only so much money. Yeah. And so how do we do it in a cost effective way so that we can get value and make good decisions and do that quickly? That's the way I think about it.
You just open up a can of worms, and I would
Sorry.
add that, no, I think it's a really great point. I think it's important is that when you're at that stage where you're really focused on burn rate, sometimes it can be hard to take the advice of partners
Yeah.
because it feels like it's contrary to me being focused and spending my money wisely
Yeah.
right now. It seems that maybe a recommendation feels like maybe that'll take a little bit longer. It will delay things. And that, that's maybe the perception, but often when we're making recommendations, it's the right way to do it.
Mhm.
And we're thinking about it at the front end as opposed to trying to backfill and fix things
Yeah.
once we've sort of, steamrolled our way up to that part of the process. So I think that's really important to consider.
Yeah. Well, the
That
problem,
as you're
the
as you're
problem
working.
there is that like partnership is what you want. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, client service provider is what people perceive. And when you're in that, when you look at it like that, then you might not be as open as you need to be. Like I would argue, I want to know, like, if you only got $100,000 that you need to go over the 6 months and you can only afford this, like, let's figure out how we do that most effectively. But most people look at it like they're negotiating a car. Like, I'm not going to tell them how much money
Yeah.
I have, because then they're just going to tell me this is how much it's going to cost. But the reality is like, tell me what you really need, and let's figure out how we get the scope in the right way to get you moving down the road. And
Yeah.
that's the partnership versus opposition. People on two sides of the table. We want to be on the same side of the table, but how do you get there without feeling anxious about it? It's back to trust.
Exactly. And yeah, and I would say that's probably one of the uh, oddly clear ways of seeing whether you have a partnership or not. I think
Yeah.
in a true partnership, you share the budget.
Yeah.
I think when you're not willing to share the budget, you don't have the trust, you don't have the relationship,
Yeah.
and it's
Exactly.
more about order taking and getting the cheapest thing I can get, and it's not always about getting to the right solution. So,
Well said,
uh,
Bill.
thank you, Greg. So Greg, thank you so much
Yeah.
for hopping on today. This was great.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, Bill.
If you made it here, thank you. If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you want to learn more about this topic, I expand on it below, as well as in my LinkedIn newsletter. That's all for now. More soon.